Korea strongly condemned the joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises, framing them as a hostile provocation. Could this joint exercise serve as a pretext for North Korea to launch further provocations or escalate tensions on the Korean Peninsula?
So, thank you for the question. I think the first thing for someone to recognize is that there's a long history of U.S. ROK, United States South Korean joint military exercises. We do a number each year of different sizes, different character. Some of them are more tabletop, and some of them are field exercises. And they're all designed to make sure that in a contingency, the U.S. and the ROK forces could cooperate effectively to respond. And this is done by countries all over the world and has been done for a century, or maybe more. So first understand that's the background. There's nothing unusual about this or especially threatening necessarily about it. And if and by we, I mean the United States and the ROK, wish to be prepared for a contingency with the DPRK, we have to exercise our forces. So some exercises are necessary. Now we come to the good part. The good part is, what is it exactly that we need to do, and how often do we need to do it? And by we, I mean the United States and South Korea, in order to be ready and to meet those needs. And can we adjust them in the interest of improving an atmosphere between the U.S., the ROK on the one hand, and the DPRK on the other? I would be careful if I was adjusting military exercises, and I would do it in close coordination between Washington and Seoul, but it's not impossible.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration has repeatedly offered talks without preconditions, yet Pyongyang remains completely unresponsive. Why is North Korea refusing? What is underlying intent?
Over this period of years, of the 30 years, we went from North Korea claiming it was not pursuing nuclear weapons, and then ultimately that it would not pursue, and it would dismantle its efforts, and then deciding that it needed nuclear weapons. And not only that, but eventually coming to the position in the relatively recent past, in the recent, let's say, last 5 years, that it was a nuclear weapon state, that it was always going to be a nuclear weapon state, and it was going to continue to build its nuclear weapons capability. This is important. It's not just a declaration of who they are, but what they're capable of. Building a nuclear weapons capability, which poses a real threat to the United States of America directly and to our treaty allies. The North would like clear recognition of their status as a nuclear weapon state. I think the United States, without being legalistic about this, the United States can say that we recognize that the North Koreans have nuclear weapons. We don't grant them, never will, I think, probably grant them, quote, nuclear weapons status as the 5 original states having nuclear weapons joined the NPT all those decades ago. That's not going to happen, I would predict. But there are other countries with whom the United States has good relations, India and Pakistan among them, that have nuclear weapons, and we don't accept them as equal to the original 5, the United States, Russia, France, Britain, and China. They're not going to fall into that class. But we recognize that they have a nuclear weapons capability. And it is U.S. policy, unless it has been changed most recently, which is not inconceivable, but I don't think it has. It is U.S. policy to resist the spread of nuclear weapons to additional countries and to argue that all countries with nuclear weapons ought to be working to reduce them, so that the United States can say to the DPRK, we're going to begin negotiations. We don't need to put the nuclear weapons issue on the table, but we have other issues that we have a joint interest in. For instance, preventing crises in which nuclear weapons are actually used.
In South Korea right now, the public and political momentum surrounding independent nuclear nuclear capabilities or domestic fuel cycle, right, continues to build as Pyongyang advances tactical nuclear and missile capabilities, do current U.S. extended deterrence mechanisms, such as the Washington Declaration and the Nuclear Consultative Group, NCG, do they provide sufficient long-term reassurance for Seoul?
It is my judgment that the South is better off in alliance with the United States, a tight alliance that includes an extended deterrent from the United States, than it would be standing with a new nuclear weapons capability, which would be, quote, relatively new for a substantial period of time. And the United States has taken a position in its negotiations with other countries that are non-nuclear weapon states, that we essentially do not wish the spread of the technologies to go to those countries that are consistent not only with peaceful nuclear energy, but also with development of nuclear weapons. And there are just these two major technologies, reprocessing and enrichment. Reprocessing leads ultimately to the availability of plutonium. Enrichment leads to the availability of uranium-235, or highly enriched uranium in that isotope. And so the United States takes special care under our law that when we cooperate in peaceful nuclear energy, that we do not create problems in terms of the acquisition of these technologies. That's the issue now that is at least on the table between the Republic of Korea and the United States, because the United States has provided technology, equipment, and material to South Korea over a lot of years. And under those agreements that permit that transfer from the United States has authority over decisions about what South Korea will do with respect to that transferred technology or material. So that discussion has been ongoing. The United States has, in simple terms, wanting to restrict the movement into these sensitive technologies, and tries to do everything it can to make sure that South Korea or other countries like Japan, like European countries, other countries with whom, and now the Middle East countries, that we may do nuclear business for peaceful purposes, that we don't advance a capability to produce nuclear weapons. The end game here is, will the United States and the ROK come to an agreement on peaceful nuclear cooperation that sustains South Korea's judgment, at least until now, to remain a non-nuclear weapon state?
With official communication channels between Washington and Pyongyang and between Seoul and Pyongyang virtually frozen, where do you see the single greatest vulnerability for unintended military escalation or miscalculation on the peninsula right now?
Okay, that is a question I think about and worry about, and so I'm sure do people in each of those three capitals, in Pyongyang, in Seoul, and in Washington. And one of the obvious ways, historically, even in focusing on Northeast Asia, is an incident of some kind, an incident in which the North Koreans take some act, maybe out of misperception, maybe in the midst of a joint military operation exercised by the United States and the ROK forces that we talked about initially. Out of some event, something happens, and since there are no real structures in place, like a hotline, like good relations that would support immediate consultation in capitals, where we can defuse a problem. What I worry about is that the North, in the recent years particularly, has been moving further and further down a road to a capability that allows them, if that's the right framing here, but permits them to attack the continental United States. And the United States, therefore, needs to be in a posture that it can deter that, and if necessary, retaliate. And if the North can do that all the way across the Pacific Ocean, can certainly do that to attack America's treaty allies in Northeast Asia, and I mean the ROK and Japan in the first instance. So we are both sides here, the DPRK on the one hand, the ROK, Japan, and the United States on the other hand, on the edge. And what we need to do is get a conversation, a serious conversation. It could be very low key. It could be at the working level to begin with, but we need engagement, which doesn't have preconditions, not about denuclearization, not about anything, except wanting to reduce tensions and create options for managing incidents that might occur.